Welcome aboard the Workplace Wiz, your audio gateway to the modern workplace. We designed this podcast as the place to discuss strategies, best practices, and share industry insights with our expert guests. This program is brought to you by YArooms, the workplace experience platform. I'm Cosmin Patlageanu, marketing professional and published author. Today we are discussing employee preferences and data, keys to better workplace experience. With me today I have Charlotte Laing. Charlotte is the Chief Marketing Officer at Metrikus. After starting her career at a globally renowned digital marketing agency, Charlotte has gone on to specialize in the workplace technology sector. During her nearly 5 years at Metrikus, she has used her expertise and visionary outlook to execute innovative marketing strategies, which have played a vital role in the company's growth. In 2021, Charlotte was listed as one of the property industry's rising stars, and in 2024, Charlotte was listed as one of Pavilion's top CMOs to watch. Charlotte, welcome. Today we're talking about employee preferences and data and keys to better workplace experience. Now, obviously, the importance of employee choice and preference in relation to workplace experience cannot be overstated. And with better access to building and workplace data, employees now have greater choices on where to work based on factors such as noise levels, air quality, temperature, light, and so on. And obviously, this increased flexibility allows them to select environments that best suit their individual needs and preferences. And while we were putting together this intro, I was thinking about back in the day when I got actually it was like my first day on a new job, and because my office wasn't ready yet, I was at this big table with the team that was testing the infotainment system for one of the big car manufacturers. And testing means they had basically all the infotainment system on the table with speakers, screens, everything. And they needed to test when somebody calls, if the radio sound goes down, and then you can pick up the phone and you can answer and you can hear. And then one of them would go on the other side of the room and call. And it was fun for a while, but it quickly became weird because I couldn't do basically anything. Because when I was taking calls, they were like, "Can you hold on, man?" I was like, I also need to talk, So obviously then things got better. I got my own office and things are all right. But, I was thinking, now we're talking about hot desking and other stuff. People used to bring plants. Oh, I saw your plant back there. And pictures of stuff and, many, many other, personal things. How have things changed in the meantime?
Yeah, I think so much changed. And about the office, especially, obviously, there's been like a massive change post-COVID. And I think we've seen that in so many different factors of the office. And that sort of people's style of working, obviously a huge shift to work from home / hybrid. But also in the roles that we're seeing of the people managing the workplace. So where we used to have FMs running pretty much everything in the workplace, we're starting to see this new role pretty much everywhere of a sort of head of workplace. It's kind of I say up and coming, but it's almost like up and come. Like everyone has one now. And I think that it's a really interesting shift because that role now has to do so much. So where, we still have HR and we still have FM, but really a head of workplace has to understand those functions very deeply as well. And they have to understand, leasing and interior design and culture and technology. And they need to have this very wide understanding of all these different things that make up an office and make up an experience within an office. So as much as, things have changed, the ways of working have changed, how employees expect the office to be has changed, the actual roles of the people who manage the building have changed too. And it does feel like, everyone's still finding their feet a little bit on this one, to be honest. And we've had times where it was the people running the workplace or the people running the company that would tell you exactly what you do and you just sort of comply and you just turn up. And maybe you can personalize it in, like you say, with your little photo or your plan. And then we've kind of gone the opposite way where people are demanding a lot from the space that they're working in, and they kind of vote with their feet, if you will, and just don't come if they don't like it. And to be honest, I hope that we see a bit of a shift towards the middle ground, where, and I think that most companies are going this way, where they want to make the office somewhere that you want to come to, and people do want to come because they want to collaborate with the people that they work with, and they want to be inspired by a space, and they want to go somewhere where they can do their best work rather than just sort of sitting at home all day, which is probably an easier choice, but maybe not the best choice.
Absolutely. I was thinking about, preferences and then expectations because you mentioned the pandemics, right? Kind of everybody made some adjustments to their home office. Some of them never had a home office, but all of a sudden they needed to, right?
Yeah.
So they started investing. Many companies have put some budget behind that, obviously. So you ended up with a good office at home. Like good things around you, proper chair, good monitors, things like that, depending on the job, obviously. And then you ask people to come back to work. And many times, or sometimes, probably not many times, but sometimes my home office is better than what I find at work. Right?
Yeah.
So how's that going to play out? I mean, who's the one, because we have IT, we have facilities, we have HR people, we now have the workplace people.
Yeah.
Who's tasked to actually find this middle ground? So make sure that whenever you're asking people to come back to work, whenever they get there, they find something suitable.
Yeah. I mean, the answer is probably it depends, which is not the answer that you probably wanted. But I think, that is almost the role of a head of workplace who is there to create this sort of seamless experience. And it's not something they can do on their own. As I said, that's a very vast role, and it's a hard role as well. It's not easy to know all those things. But you do have to bring other teams together, and it might be the IT help desk that need to fix the like Cisco kit that's in the meeting room, or maybe it's the FM team that need to fix the coffee machine or whatever it ends up being. But I think it does come back to that sort of workplace team to make sure everyone is speaking to each other and everyone is collaborating. And it sounds easy to say just collaborate, but a lot of the time these teams have competing interests as well. So how can businesses sort of start to KPI teams to be more collaborative and to work better together? Because like you say, it's easier when you're at home and you know that your laptop camera is always going to work, and then rather than getting to a meeting room and sort of nothing works and then nobody fixes it for 3 days. So yeah, we need to find that experiential service as well.
Absolutely. I always found it funny that there was a sort of a race, when companies were looking for a new space, then the realtors were there like, oh, come to our building because we have like top-notch state-of-the-art thingies, which sometimes meant that they had like a running lanes or something like that on top of the building. Gardens, there was sort of windows, kind of depends, right? And to some extent, some of the CEOs were like super excited about that. In reality, there were like 5 people running.
Yeah.
And whenever they wanted to run, they would run away from the office or from home, and they would go in a park or something like that. So nice to have, but does it really impact something there? And I always thought that communication was like super important, asking people what do they really want, or what do they really need in this particular case. And now we have the workplace roles, which I have to admit, I was a little bit curious where they're coming from. Are they HR people transitioning to a workplace role or facilities? And I found it's mostly facilities and operations, the ones that I got in touch with. And it's really interesting, right? Because you would have assumed that making sure people's experience at work is more like an HR thingy, right?
Yeah.
But apparently, roles have shifted a little bit. It's, as you said, there isn't a straight answer, this or that. It's basically depending on the company, really. But how do they make sure it works? I mean, they have a lot of data, right? Because this is one of the most important things, having data. What happens next? So they get the data. What happens next? What do they do with it?
This is almost kind of the problem, is that they maybe have a lot of data, but they either can't access it or maybe don't know what to do when they can access it. So a lot of the times it's sort of data overload, and you end up in a position where you know that there's 150 errors in the BMS, or that there's 7 meeting rooms that are underoccupied, but you don't really know how to change that. I think this is, again, is sort of two things. Can we start to bring data sources together and start to overlay data sources, and then we can actually automate things or start to prove what changes we can make. Things like a meeting room's booked, or all the meeting rooms are booked out, and you come to the office, you need a meeting room, but you can't because they're all booked out on the system. But you walk in and you see 4 that are free, and you don't know whether you can go in there or not because maybe someone's late, or maybe someone just hasn't turned up or hasn't cancelled it. So can we start to overlay those data sets and release meeting rooms where someone has been a no-show and make them available to other people? Same thing with desks, same things with the sort of phone booths as well. And the second thing is, I think we'll see much more data analyst type skill sets coming into these workplace teams. There's so many companies selling you data, or selling you hardware, selling you the next thing that you must have. But a lot of the time, people haven't made the basic changes that they need to make the use of that data and get the real value from it. So I think having data analysts and data skill sets within workplace teams is really going to help with that. And we'll start to see people being much, I think, more clever, to be honest, with the data. And that's where you'll see a lot of gains in building efficiency, sustainability, and also the experience part as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that was like a really important point that you made, automating some of it. So if I'm booking a room and then I'm not showing like in the first 5 minutes or so, just release it, right?
Yeah.
For the next one to have.
Yeah.
It was such a hassle, when I used to work like daily in an office, and we did have meeting rooms. One of them was reserved for the C-levels, right?
Yeah.
And you couldn't book that one unless you went to front desk, and then it was like, okay, if it's available, and it was like there was no other option. But the other ones, you wouldn't book them, you would have just gone there, right? At some point, we had the system, sort of a system. You would have just said, I'm going to get that particular room. And I had this very important meeting, and I welcomed people going, showing them around and going towards the meeting room. And the moment I opened the door, here's my colleague with like a monitor, and those lamps that you see videographers, the ones that do stuff online, recording things, and the lights were on, and he was in the middle of something, and I was like, who's coming here? I said, I'm teaching. I was like, I'm sorry, just close the door. I said, okay, we need to find another place because it's impossible to kick the guy out, right?
Yeah.
And he was also teaching at the university, and he had a course going on, and he couldn't attend, so he went live on camera. It was so funny, but obviously frustrating a little bit because you have everything set up. Yeah. So
like
those these days,
is it booked? Yeah. Is there someone there? And even better, like, what's the air quality like? So GSK, one of our customers, they've started implementing something that I think is really clever, which is overlaying that data. You can see who's in the meeting room, or so if there's someone there, if it's booked, but also if the air quality is good or if it's not. And where it's not good, they make that meeting room unbookable until the air quality goes back up. So I think not only does that serve a sort of functional purpose for people to be able to make sure that they are productive and have spaces that suit them, but it also communicates to the employee that GSK care about their well-being, because you're saying, this isn't a good place for you to be, so we won't make it available. And I think that is one step that hopefully we'll see a lot more heads of workplace or companies take, where they're communicating the data to their employees as well, and they can see that they can take action based on that data as well.
I'm a little bit jealous, to be honest, here. So, going through so many buildings, during my career, at some point I had this office and I had like a big glass wall. And the problem was that during summer it got really, really hot next to the window. And in winter it got really, really cold.
Yeah.
And the problem was, this used to be like a big office. And they cut it in half, and half of it was mine. They basically put a wall. Okay. And behind me was the recruitment department. all ladies. And I don't like heat. I would rather keep things cool, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't have the big window, so it was rather chilly on their end. And we only had one controller for the air conditioning, which was on their end.
Yeah.
And it was a swamp in my office, and they were like, really nice, 21, 22 degrees. So then, we had a lot of negotiating going on, and eventually I moved the controller into my office, and that was it, because it was impossible. But then it was too cold for them. That was such a nightmare for them for a while.
And this is the thing as well, right? It's it's actually it's wider. It's actually a diversity issue as well, because the thing is that females like the set point a bit higher. They run a bit hotter. They need somewhere a bit more warm, and for their productivity, it suits for it to be warmer. Now, the BMS world pretty much still is and always has been dominated by males. So the set point that is a standard is set at a slightly cooler temperature, which is preferable to males. And this point is really interesting, because I don't think people really think about it and think about how unproductive you are when you're too hot or you're too cold either. And you do see a lot of sort of productivity loss from that, and sitting, complaining, maybe negotiating with someone to put it up. And something I've seen some companies do, which is a really great way to solve this, is just having a floor plan and being able to overlay a heat map, which shows you the areas that are slightly warmer and the areas that are slightly cooler. Because people have preferences, and if they can take the decision, then it kind of solves the one temperature for everyone problem, and you can just actually find the sort of heat spots or the cooler spots in the building.
I think that's a fantastic way to mitigate the potential, little conflict, but still annoying, right? So I was going a little bit into this diversity thing without actually wanting to elaborate too much. But strangely enough, it was different for us. So yeah, obviously it was probably the facilities department was like, I think 99% men. So probably, yeah, you're right. They were the ones that decided it's got to be cooler. We were wearing suits, right? Middle of the summer.
Yeah.
So you need cooler temperatures. Yeah. You ladies, we were like a nice dress or something. Silk, thank you very much. It's a difference there, right?
Yeah.
So I still needed to do the work. They needed to do the work as well. But now that I'm thinking, probably feedback, in a proper fashion, like structured, would have helped eventually. But the question is, obviously that's a story from a different era, but now when you have a flow map, for instance, I mean, when you pick and choose, wherever you want to work from, obviously you can choose to work from next to me if you want to have some conversations and collaborate on stuff. Yeah. But otherwise, you look, is it next to a window? Is it summer? Are there 35 degrees outside? I think I'll pass, right? I'm going next to a wall probably. But then, if we go into deeper details, and if you have sensors as people from GSK have, and like super advanced technology, then you can see where the air conditioning has to blow harder because, it's warmer there. You have the heat map. So then it doesn't really matter, right? You can actually rest assured that wherever you pick a spot on that floor plan, you're going to be okay temperature-wise, right?
Yeah.
So you only have to worry about who you're next to.
Yeah.
Do you want to work with that department or the other one, or things like that? But the point I was trying to make is, who's now in charge of getting the feedback so they can implement it further down the line? Is it facilities, or is it the new workplace role?
I think it's both. I think it's kind of, again, they have to work together, because if they don't, it will never work. I mean, and that is almost kind of the problem. One problem is sort of data silos in systems. So you have sort of your air quality sensors, your meeting room booking, your occupancy sensor that maybe don't talk to each other, and that isn't going to solve any problems. But on top of that, if one team has the data and they can't use that to feed back to other teams or give other teams access, then you're losing out on a lot of value that you can get from that data. So I think the real value is having, different, each team will be different, will be interested in different data points. And for them, being able to see the data that they're interested in and be proactive based on that, and then collaborate together and say, we're all making this the best place to work. We're all making the experience better. Because ultimately, the workplace team aren't going to go down to the HVAC system and change it. And equally, the FM team aren't going to sit and redesign the floor plan. I don't think anyway. So they do have to work together. And yeah, it's becoming a much bigger strategic issue for companies.
Is it part of the return to work, let's call it, adventure? I mean, if I would have decided that all the team has to go back to work 5 days a week, then I would imagine I would hit some hurdles, right? And one of those would be, is it providing me enough of everything that I need? People always complain, about the time that they spend commuting and so on.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're right about that. But there are some other things that you can't do, of course, when only working remotely. But now I'm thinking about, customization and personalization of the workplace. Since many of the companies went this route with hot desking and not necessarily assigning a desk to somebody in the long run, what's the level of personalized workplace now? What can you do, basically?
I think there's a lot you can do. I'm not sure if I'm an advocate for hyper-personalization. So you can, if you want, have, everyone can choose what temperature they want and control the system. Everyone can have access to light levels and, those sorts of like really personalized spaces. But I think that we need to balance the efficiency part of the argument with how the building's run and operated with the experiential part. And yeah, I could push fresh air into my building 24/7 and the air quality would be amazing and everyone would be super healthy, super productive. But I'd also be spending loads on operating the building and it'd be terrible for the environment. So it's about finding that happy middle. And there are ways to kind of get to both. So with the teams that are running that, the FM team or the head of workplace are both together, they can see the data and they have the wider understanding of how the building's run and how it's being used. As an individual, I can see when I turn up, what's being used, what I like. I have a preference, what the temperature is, but I don't really understand what it takes to run the building in that way. So I think it's about allowing the teams that are running the building and have the vast scope to kind of do what they need to do to balance that experience and efficiency part, but then also giving the employees enough data to make it sort of personalized and they can make choices. So like we said, the overlaying heat map with the indoor air quality, you could do the same with noise. You could do the same with seeing who's sitting where, what rooms have whiteboards and different types of technology that you might need and what areas are silent, heads down, laptops only. So yeah, I think data, communicating the data and allowing the building users to use that, but also not, my recommendation would be not to go into the sort of hyper-personalized area because I think that it diminishes the amount of efficiency gains that you can get.
Yeah, absolutely. And it will be difficult to accomplish that. I mean, if everyone has access to customizing lights and the temperature and everything in an open floor, for instance, that would be.
I mean, it is
tricky at least,
and it sounds wild, but yeah.
I mean, just picture this. I mean, you're in a car, 4 people in a car. Admittedly, the car has 4, I don't know, climate zones or how do you call them, and everybody can play with the temperature. One sets it to 20, one to 28, one to 15, one to 40. It's gonna be impossible for the car to just pull over and say, "Yeah, everybody get out."
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not driving you anyway. That would be probably the answer. But obviously, you've encountered these situations in the past. What's the best way further and forward? Because you have on one hand you have people's requests, and some of them or most of them are common sense requests. But on the other hand, you have everything that's going on in the background, and it's for somebody who has never thought about it. It's kind of a big area, right? So you have expenses going on. You have, during summer, you would only have the HVAC systems on cold. You can't turn them on heat, and if the temperature drops, the system needs some time to get accustomed to the new settings and so on. You can't dump that sort of information on people because they say, well, do I care? I mean, I just need to show up, so that's not my job. So thank you very much. See you tomorrow. When the temperature is right. So how do you balance this? Because I see it as a balancing act, right? So no matter who's the one in charge, eventually, if it's the workplace working as a liaison between the FMs and the people, what's, in your opinion, the best way to accommodate this?
I think that the sort of executive at an executive level of the company, like they need to take workplace and real estate and like the workplace experience seriously. It's not a question of just saying return to work 5 times a week or 3 times a week. It isn't that simple because, things fluctuate, things change, and buildings are used differently than they were set up to be used. The way that we interact with buildings and use buildings today is not how it was supposed to be when they were built, 50 whatever years ago. And so it does need to be taken seriously because it is a massive amount of money that's spent on it as well. And so, I'm completely in agreement with you that it does need to be this sort of balance, and it's starting with data and looking at it, but also trusting the people that are in those roles to, try different things and see what works. Can we trial using the building in a different way? Can we trial asking people to work in different areas and, different temperatures and these sorts of things, and kind of get to a more efficient place and get to a smoother experience? I think the thing you were saying earlier about the CEO's office is quite interesting, because that is the way it used to be, that there was one office and it was C-suite and you can't enter it. But I think we're entering a new sort of era of more of a flat structure when it comes to office hierarchy as well. And quite a good example of this is the One Manhattan West building at Accenture. They have a whole floor which is dedicated to the C-suite. But the C-suite don't work out of there most of the time. And when they don't, they actually reconfigure the floor, and that's bookable on their system. So it means that it isn't lying empty for half the year. It's pretty much always occupied, because they've got the sort of infrastructure in place to be able to change the floor plan and make it a bit more customizable and a bit more usable. So I think we'll see a lot of that going forward too, some sort of multi-purpose spaces that can be changed and adapted
based on the situation. So I just remember something, and it's one of the stories that I like to share every time I have the chance. So I was new in this company, and we had multiple buildings, and I went to meet so he actually was the founder of the company. I don't remember exactly what role he had back then, because he wasn't the CEO anymore. There was a transition, and it was a new building. I had no way to know where to go. So basically, I was just roaming the floors, hoping to get somebody, to run into somebody I knew. So asking him, where's the guy's office?
Yeah.
And which eventually happened and I was really happy. I said, where's his office? It was like, you go down the hall and you'll see like a big spot of coffee on the carpet, and that's it. I was like, what do you mean a big spot? There's always fresh coffee on the floor. I said, why would it be fresh coffee on the floor outside? It doesn't make any sense. He said, it doesn't make any sense, but that's the way it is. That's how we find it. I said, okay. No, I didn't ask more questions. We weren't that friendly.
Yeah.
So I go down the corridor. I see fresh spot of coffee on the ground. I looked, the door was open. He was at his computer, working on something. I said, hey, hi. Had a little chat, and then I was like, I couldn't stand it anymore. I said, what's with the coffee? I said, why the coffee's there? I said, no, obviously that's why I'm asking. And you know why I was there? Because people would go down the corridor with the coffee mugs and look inside to see if he's there, and they would bump into one another, right? And there was always coffee on the ground. And he was that open.
That's so funny.
His office was always, I don't think I've ever seen his door closed. And he was like that, just a really nice guy.
Yeah.
And there was always coffee on the carpet.
That's funny.
Nightmare for the cleaning. So cleaning department, of course.
No, it's such a good point, and it reminds me of something I read a while ago, which now I can't remember where I read it, which is not, I think it might have been Adam Grant. And it was about Bell Labs and when they actually started and they created their sort of office. And what they did is they put a really long corridor in place, and they had loads of different offices with different sort of scientists working out of it. And some of the like largest innovations came out of this office in quite quick succession. And people were wondering like, how is this place so innovative? Like, what is it about the way that it's done? And after looking at it, they realized it was because you couldn't get your cup of coffee or get your cup of water without bumping into someone on the way because the corridor was so long. So they would be bumping into each other, having a conversation, sharing ideas, chatting about things that just come up. And that sparks a lot of innovation and a lot of ideas and a lot of cross collaboration, which I think is just such a good example of how, if you can lay something out in the right way, you can create these sort of moments of innovation and moments of collaboration that otherwise wouldn't be there. And I'm a big advocate for flexibility, a big advocate for hybrid working. But that being said, you do lose the sort of those moments like that. And it's not as easy just to pick up the phone and kind of have a random conversation with a colleague. So I think it's a good point.
No, absolutely. I'm also in favor of flexibility and hybrid. As a matter of fact, I'm at home right now. So that works well for me. But eventually, all the water cooler sort of conversations, they don't happen.
Yeah.
And they don't happen just like that. You need to set up the environment for that sort of a conversation. So I think we're missing, really. Mm-hmm. But it's like a learning curve. It will evolve into something else. I'm not sure which way it will go. But something's got to give eventually.
Yeah,
I was thinking about your example. That was a happy accident, right, with the long corridor.
Yeah.
And as you were telling the story, I was thinking, okay, why was it? Was it because you go through a long corridor and you think about things? Is it because you meet people on the corridor? Is it because you don't want to go out because it's too far to get coffee? I was just trying to figure out before you told the story. But thinking of data, because obviously whenever they understood that there is something going on there, they looked into it, right? And admittedly, now it's much easier to get to that sort of data. Mm-hmm. The question is, what sort of data should companies look at in the beginning? So what would be like, what's the priority, basically?
Well, I guess it depends one of the first things is to understand what you really want to achieve. And I think that is one thing that happens where, companies want data and they go all in on sensor tech and all of these different parameters. And then they don't really get the value out of it because they don't really know what they want to achieve in the first place. So really understanding, what is it you want to achieve from this data, and then we can go into, how you're going to get there. One thing, like if it were me, where I would always start is probably occupancy, because occupancy gives you an understanding of how the building is being used, and everything else happens off the back of that. So occupancy and indoor quality combined can help you sort of experientially helps you maximize the usability of the space, and also helps you sort of reduce your energy costs as well, because you can start to see, where are we heating or cooling places where it's not being used. And those are some really quick ways to get a really good ROI on the technology. And then from there, the data can just help you make those like incremental changes. So yeah, that's kind of where I would start.
Because I was also thinking, many times people take into account, where the office is, how far it is, mm-hmm. How good it is, and somehow, starting with Google back in the day with the campus and everything else, mm-hmm. the race was on.
Yeah.
So now I'm thinking it's probably not even a nice to have; it's mandatory to have like a proper office with everything. So. You think is there a way, basically, starting from data, to make sure you improve your workplace so it it's more attractive to people. I mean, is that even a thing? Is something that customers think about?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it comes back to this experience piece, but I definitely get where you're going with the Google example, because that was the office of the time, and they still have that, Peloton bikes and gyms, and you can get your hair cut there and like your nails done and all of these great things, and that is really handy. But that is handy for a specific type of person, probably someone who doesn't have kids, probably someone who doesn't have a family. They want young people who just want to live at work and meet their friends there and hang out there all the time because they've got like a kind of, tiny apartment. Or I actually read a book the other day about one of the guys who worked, I think it was Facebook, and then went on to Google, and he lived in his car, but he didn't need to have a house because everything was at the office. And that's the kind of people that they want working there. And that works for them, but it doesn't work for most companies. So I think the point there is like it does depend on the culture of your workforce, and the culture influences the space, and the space also influences the culture. And we do see, more sort of mature, cultured companies going for much more of the experience play, where it's like, people want to come in, get their work done to the best of their ability, and then they want to go home. They don't want to stay till whatever time at night because they've got the kids, or they pick them up, or they've got families. Especially after COVID, people have kind of detached a little bit from work as a personality. They're more, work is a part of life, but there's life too. And that's really where we see the data come into play. So starting to see, what kind of spaces are people using more? Can we have more spaces like that? So is the whiteboard area really busy? Is a particular coffee machine always got a queue, always really busy? And we can have more of those. Is the yoga room always really busy? Or is, the air quality good in a specific area and people are gravitating there? Like those kinds of things, where the workplace enables you to do your best work, and kind of less about the frilly things at the side.
I think this, when you're right, it's a more mature approach, and I like that Google example because many other companies said, "Oh, look at these guys! Look at what they've done," and what they got out of that was, "Let's get a pool table.
Yeah,
people will be happy."
Yeah, it's true.
And let's go really crazy and get like a ping pong table as well, table tennis. Like that's no, that doesn't. It's not the way it's supposed to work, right? So. Many times you would have seen those improvements and you would expect people to be like really happy, but that's a very shallow approach, right?
Yeah, and it's
because what you mentioned is much more important, really.
Yeah, and it's, like I say, it just comes back to the culture of the company. I mean, I used to work prior to Metrikus at a company that was sort of born out of Google, and I don't think there was a single person there that was over the age of 30, and everyone played Mario Kart at lunch and worked till 8 and then went for drinks. And, that worked for their model. Now that they've scaled and they're a much bigger company, I'm sure it doesn't work for them the same. And yeah, with these sort of big enterprise companies that are trying to change the way that people work, ping pong tables and Mario Kart doesn't cut it. But creating places where people can do their best work so that they can make lots of money and go home and have their own time, that works for people.
Absolutely. We gave these examples, but if they're obviously like one of the biggest companies in the world, how about the smaller ones? I mean, they obviously don't have the budget, the resources. Many times they don't even have the know-how, right?
Yeah.
So how can they make the most out of their workplaces?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's definitely harder when you have less space. The things I would probably look at again, I think occupancy and indoor air quality are quite cost-effective ways. Even in small spaces, you get a really good ROI. So I think that's really effective. And then the sort of customizable areas are really effective too, because if you've got that small amount of space, being able to change the way that's used can be really effective. So, one day you might have a team that want to do like big whiteboard creative day, but maybe that's only used once a month. So if you can split that meeting room up into smaller ones for the rest of the month, then that's a really good use of space. So it's all about sort of maximizing what you have, and any sort of technology you can implement to help you do that, then it benefits.
Absolutely. So I was thinking, when you have like a smaller team, things are rather easier to manage, right? But depending on the culture, because some companies have that sort of a direct conversation approach, so many of them don't need and don't have processes in place. And one of the processes which I really think it's important or even mandatory is feedback. Getting feedback, asking for it, and get it in a way that can be actionable afterwards. And I think this is where actually technology can play a role. Right? So even if you're a smaller company, you can get some of the tech. So obviously you don't need a myriad of sensors and who knows what like state of the art technology, but you can do with less than that, and you can understand people's priorities and preferences and kind of balance them in a way so you can provide the bare minimum so they can do their best work, right?
Yeah, definitely. And if they feel like, I think the key thing with that is that feedback's actioned. And I've seen this a lot where, people get feedback because they think they should get feedback, but then they don't really do anything with the feedback. So as long as you're getting the feedback and actually making the changes, or at least communicating, your plans to make them or why you might not be making them, that's a really important step as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was thinking, we spoke a little bit about the past and how Google started this race. But how about the future? I mean, what do you see in terms of trends, and specifically regarding data and integrations and workplace management overall?
Yeah. It's interesting what you're saying about the high tech thing, because I think I do see actually people going like sensorless. So in fact, a lot of people have invested a lot of like money and time into lots of different sensor systems. I think we'll see that sort of slow down a little bit, and people being a little bit more thoughtful about the strategy. And there's a lot of data that you can get from a building itself without needing to go and implement loads of sensors. So whether it's Cisco meeting room technology, or you've got your sort of team spaces, your access control, sometimes even your lighting, you can have smart lighting. These things can all give you a really interesting amount of detail and data to then make decisions. And then once you have that and you've done the basics, you can start to overlay the sensor technology, which gives that extra level of detail and that extra amount of sort of ROI and optimizations that you can start to see. So I think not going all in, spending loads of money on tech, and then thinking, "Wow, what do I do with this?" is actually probably gonna happen a bit more. But that being said, I think that the prop tech companies are going to start to work a lot better together as well. Like right now, everyone's kind of fighting for their opportunity or to have the bit of technology. But when it's going to be really effective is when, we all start speaking to each other a lot more, like we're doing today, and actually sharing insights and understanding that when we work together, it's going to be far more effective for everyone. And that's for the sort of end user occupiers who are using this technology. They're going to get way more from it. And also as technology providers, we're going to be able to innovate at a much faster rate. So yeah, I think those are my two big ones.
I really like that. I would use it as a positive end note, right? So collaboration is basically something we talk about every day, but it rarely happens at the level that you actually share something which is important in fostering innovation eventually.
Yeah.
And I do agree there is I would call it a sensor overload, if that's even a thing. When you got, everything has got some sort of AI or tech on it today. Even, you go on a bike, it's got 5 sensors on cadence, heart rate, stuff, how fast you go. Then you upload everything somewhere. It's like, Also, people go into concerts, they get like 25,000 pictures of the concert instead that they're never gonna go through again.
Yeah.
So taking that step back, I think it's important, not just in the context of our conversation, but overall, it's getting more to the meaningful part eventually.
Yeah, exactly. And like you say, there's so much data out there, and we need to be collecting that because it will help in the future with AI. But AI only has like the kind of, I don't want to say a bad word, crap in, crap out, let's say.
Yes.
And if we've got data that's integrated and cleaned and normalized, AI can go and build on that and start to give us really interesting insights. If we have data that's siloed and in disparate systems, then we're not going to get anything of value out of that. So that sort of working together piece is really important as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we as marketers are very, very familiar with the concept that you just mentioned. I mean, the quality of the stuff that you put in is basically the quality of the stuff that goes out.
Yeah.
Normally.
Yeah.
But then again, I mean, if you remember, there was a big fuss about big data at some point. I mean, nobody could really tell what big data is. I needed to do a brochure back in the day, and I was like, I had no idea what this means. What's the big data? And I went to my colleagues, which are the technical guys, and they explained it to me. I said, okay, so what do we do with this? And they were like, not really sure, but it's like, this is the thing right now, right? So, okay, everybody did big data. Eventually, it didn't turn into something that meaningful as everyone expected when it started. So I do think it's a good idea to have the data as long as you use it for something meaningful.
100%.
Yeah. Fantastic. It's been a great conversation, and I'm really looking, for the next couple of years, seeing how the prop tech world goes, and where innovation comes from. I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be good.
That's fantastic. Thank you for joining us, and hope to have you on our podcast soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.